Whether you're donating a kidney or receiving a kidney, there usually is a coordinator or facilitator who helps with much of the business surrounding a transplant. When the donor and the recipient are from the same family, it works well to have the same person, an employee of the hospital where the donation is to take place, facilitate both parties. But, especially when the donor is a stranger, it raises issues which make everything a little more complicated. On the whole, I and others have felt that donors were occasionally, in the past anyway, but certainly not always, marginalized. It became popular for hospitals not to even introduce the donor to the recipient for fear that it could lead to pressures from the donor, after the operation that is, to get compensation from the kidney recipient. In addition, because it was the recipient's insurance company that covered all of the bills, much of the attention focused on the recipient. The donor was often left underrepresented and needed help from others to get such things as guaranteed free aftercare. Groups like Living Donors Online have gone a long way toward getting better recognition for live organ donors. Although anonymous live organ donors still tend to be somewhat sidelined, with much of the unspoken emphasis being on ways to prevent the donor from getting access to the recipient, because how they might abuse that information. Ironically, no one ever seems to worry about such abuses happening between friends or family members. Most people don't realize how insulting that can be for someone who's sincerely trying to help out someone who's in need. After the media announced that some of my friends had donated anonymously to people who needed kidney transplants, friends and relatives of other people who needed kidneys started writing to me asking if I knew anyone else who might be prepared to donate a kidney for their friend. Well, I asked around, and sure enough, over a period of several years, about 30 of my friends donated kidneys to various people. In most of those cases, I acted as an advocate for the donor, making sure that all the expenses were covered, that provision was made for a carer to be present before and after the operation, and requiring that nearby accommodation and meals be provided for the two of them for the first 2 weeks after release from hospital, because that was the time when complications were most likely to occur. There's really very little difference between what I do and what the hospital transplant coordinator does, except that I represent the donor exclusively. There's nothing in it for me and nothing in it for the donor. But it does usually cost the recipient a little more, especially if someone comes from another country to donate. The main two expenses are travel expenses for a carer and accommodation after the operation. All other expenses are almost universally covered by the recipient's insurance company. But what both parties experience when working through someone like myself is more personal contact between the donor and the recipient. People who are looking for a donor usually write to me detailing the need and giving some background on the potential recipient, both in medical terms and in describing the recipient as a real human being, not just a name on a list. I then send the request out as a general newsletter to a mailing list of friends who have expressed some interest in donating, or who may know someone else who has expressed an interest in donating. Through reading the letter, these people get to see the possible recipient as a real person, and they get to hear some of the details about their needs and their family background, etc. I encourage the friend or relative who is writing as an advocate for the recipient to correspond with me and not to get hopes too high too quickly for the recipient. I do much the same for the donor. So if they have contact with each other at all, it's just as friends, without pressure about arrangements and things like that. At the moment, there are only a couple of people requesting kidneys and only a couple of friends who have expressed any interest in donating a kidney. But I can well imagine that when this series of videos goes up on A Voice in the Desert, there's going to be a lot of people writing in who are looking for someone to donate a kidney. It would be helpful to have a matching list of people who are at least open to hearing their story. It's especially risky if I don't know you and you don't know me, as some money will change hands, in particular when it comes time to fly the donor and a carer to the hospital for the final tests and/or the operation. Now, the safest way for the recipient to do that is just to purchase a non-refundable ticket, but it can still be a little bit scary. On the whole, I myself would probably say the safest option is still to go through the hospital. especially if it's a hospital that's close to where you live. Nevertheless, if you do decide that you would like to meet the person you are considering donating to, I could give you access to some of the media coverage of past donations with which I've been connected, just to give you a little more reassurance that no hanky-panky's going on. It's not all flattering, but I'm pleased to say that even some sections of the media who went out of their way to imply that something sneaky was going on, not one of those journalists reported any impropriety on my part. And believe me, if I could have found anything to make me look bad, they certainly would have had no hesitation in making it public. Other than that, I mostly want to see people just coming forward with kidney donations to meet the great need that exists. So I've got no problem at all. If you want to go through the hospitals, that's great. In fact, it kind of makes my job a lot easier. But I would like to hear how things go if you're doing that. It's especially encouraging to me if I can hear that some people are actually donating kidneys as a result of the emphasis we've placed on that here on A Voice in the Desert. So I'll leave it at that. If you want to contact me, just use the email address on the screen at the moment. I look forward to hearing from you. Goodbye for now.